The morning I came home from visiting family in Charlotte, the sharp metallic stench of copper sulfate mixed with rotting scales hit me before I stepped out of my truck. The lake water turned an unnatural blue-green, like antifreeze mixed with apocalypse, and there was Big Bertha, my 8-pound bass who came to my dock every morning for 3 years, named, fed, and watched grow into a lake legend, now floating belly up with 200 other fish, bluegill, crappie, catfish, because HOA President Vivian Blackwater, who thought she owned my lake, dumped $3,500 of industrial algicide into my crystal clear water overnight, annihilating an entire ecosystem in her suburban genocide, leaving me shaken with pure rage as I held Bertha's slimy, lifeless body, until I realized something absolutely beautiful. Vivian's fancy subdivision of 847 homes gets their drinking water from the same underground spring feeding my lake. Every drop, every house, meaning she didn't just poison my fish, but her entire neighborhood, with no clue what's about to hit her. So, if you've had neighbors who thought they could destroy your property just because they didn't like what you were doing, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from, because this story is about to get wild.
My name's Marcus Reed. At 52, I never thought I'd be at war with a woman who probably spends more on her manicures than I make in a week. But that's suburbia for you. I'm a retired electrician turned solar panel installer here in Pine Ridge, North Carolina. The kind of guy who fixes things with his hands and believes people should mind their own damn business. My 12-acre property, with its spring-fed lake, has been in my family since 1952, back when this whole area was tobacco fields and common sense. Every morning, I walk that gravel path my grandfather laid, boots crunching on stones worn smooth by decades of fishermen. The dock planks feel warm and weathered under my hands, still sticky with morning dew. That sweet honeysuckle smell mixes with the clean mineral scent of spring water. Blue herons nest in the cypress trees. Bass jump at dawn. For 70 years, this place has been pure peace. Then the developers showed up.
15 years ago, they bought everything around me and built Willow Creek Estates. 847 McMansions, starting at $600,000 each. They offered me millions to sell. Wanted my lake for their country club. I told them they could take their money and build a clubhouse in hell. Most of the new neighbors were fine. Normal people who waved when they jogged past, maybe asked about the fishing. But then Vivian Blackwater moved in. Picture this, 47 years old, drives a white Lexus that's detailed more often than most people shower, carries a leather portfolio to neighborhood barbecues. She talks like a lawyer even when ordering coffee, throws around phrases like property value optimization and aesthetic compliance standards, the kind of person who probably schedules her bathroom breaks. Vivian appointed herself HOA president within 6 months and immediately launched her enhancement campaigns, which is fancy talk for making everyone miserable until they bowed to her suburban dictatorship. Her opening shot came 3 months after she moved in. Certified mail, official letterhead, the whole production. My unsightly fishing activities were apparently disturbing her peaceful enjoyment of the neighborhood. $800,000 she paid for that lakefront view, and watching me catch dinner was somehow ruining her investment. The legal threats escalated fast. She claimed my dock violated aesthetic covenants that were supposed to apply to all area properties. The woman actually had the nerve to demand I tear down a structure that's been here since before she was born. I called my buddy Tom Martinez, a real estate lawyer who saved my ass more than once. He nearly choked on his coffee laughing. Marcus, property that predates HOA establishment cannot be subject to retroactive covenants. She's threatening you with laws that don't exist. Knowledge nugget. If your property existed before an HOA was formed, their rules generally can't be applied to your land retroactively. Your deed date is your legal shield. When intimidation failed, Vivian filed a false complaint with the county about my illegal dock structure. Poor inspector drove out here, looked at my 1987 permits, and apologized for wasting his time. You could practically see him rolling his eyes. That's when she revealed her true nature.
Every morning, I'd head down to fish. 6 a.m. when the bass are feeding. And suddenly, Vivian needed emergency landscaping. Leaf blowers, chainsaws, industrial mowers, all screaming at maximum volume, right along her property line. The diesel fumes would drift across my lake, mixing with honeysuckle and turning my peaceful morning into something that smelled like a highway construction zone. Her crew got more overtime in 2 months than most people see all year, all because one guy was trying to fish in his own backyard. But I kept fishing. Some principles are worth defending, even against suburban tyrants with too much money and too little sense. I had no idea that Vivian was just getting warmed up, and I definitely didn't know she was crazy enough to commit environmental terrorism to get her way.
You know what's worse than a Karen with a law degree? A Karen with a law degree who thinks property surveys are weapons of mass destruction. 2 weeks after the county inspector laughed at her illegal dock complaint, Vivian hired the most expensive surveyor in 3 counties to verify our property boundaries. Not because there was any question. My grandfather marked those lines with concrete posts that'll probably outlast civilization itself. This was pure harassment with a professional invoice. The surveyor showed up Tuesday morning with equipment worth more than my truck. Lasers, GPS units, levels that probably cost more per hour than most people make in a day. I watched from my kitchen window, sipping coffee and enjoying the show, as they spent 6 hours measuring the exact same boundary that's been legally established since Truman was president. 3 days later, Vivian's lawyer sent me a registered letter claiming my dock extended exactly 6 inches onto community water rights. 6 whole inches on a lake that's been in my family since before she was born. But here's where Vivian really showed her true colors. She filed an actual lawsuit in county court for property encroachment. Professional letterhead, court stamps, filing fees that probably cost more than most people's car payments. All over 6 inches of dock space. When this woman commits to ruining someone's life, she doesn't mess around.
While her legal papers crawled through the system, she launched a Facebook campaign that would make a political operative jealous, posted in the Willow Creek Estates group about her difficult neighbor who was refusing to respect community standards. The comment section turned into a digital lynch mob faster than you could say property values. But 2 can play the research game. I spent my weekend in the county courthouse basement, breathing dust that was probably older than Vivian's entire career, digging through deed records and property transfers. Sometimes the best revenge is just knowing more than your enemy. And holy hell did I hit the jackpot. My grandfather didn't just own the land. He owned exclusive water rights to the entire lake system. Every drop, every fish, every damn molecule of H2O. The original 1952 deed specifically included all water rights, surface and subsurface, including natural springs and tributaries thereto. But here's the beautiful part that made me laugh so hard I nearly fell off my chair. The lake is spring-fed from an underground aquifer that extends directly under Vivian's precious subdivision. Legally speaking, every time her neighbors flush their toilets, they're using my water. Knowledge nugget: water rights often transfer separately from land ownership and are recorded in property deeds. These rights can be worth more than the land.
I called Tom Martinez with my discovery. After he stopped cackling like a madman, he said, "Marcus, you don't just have a defense. You've got a nuclear weapon disguised as a property deed." So we filed a countersuit for harassment, slander, and abuse of legal process. But the timing? That was pure poetry.
Vivian was hosting one of her fancy backyard dinner parties. 40-plus HOA residents standing around with wine glasses, complaining about their property taxes while eating food that cost more per bite than most people spend on lunch. Right in the middle of Vivian's speech about maintaining community standards and property values, our sheriff's deputy walked through her back gate like he owned the place. "Ma'am, I need to serve you with some legal documents." 40 conversations stopped mid-sentence. The only sound was ice clinking nervously in glasses as Vivian's perfectly manicured hands trembled reading the papers. Her foundation couldn't hide how pale she went when she realized what she was holding. "This is harassment," she shrieked, loud enough to rattle windows. "That redneck is trying to intimidate me with frivolous lawsuits." And there it was. The mask slipped completely. The refined real estate attorney became just another suburban tyrant having a nuclear meltdown because someone dared fight back. Her dinner guests suddenly remembered urgent appointments. Amazing how fast rich people can evacuate when someone starts screaming about rednecks at a catered party. But Vivian wasn't done. The next morning, I found an anonymous note under my windshield wiper. "Stop fishing or face the consequences." Apparently, public humiliation just made her more dangerous.
There's nothing quite like watching someone turn federal agencies into their personal attack dogs. Within a week of my countersuit, I had more government inspectors crawling over my property than a meth lab bust. Fish and Wildlife showed up first, claiming they needed to investigate potential disruption to migratory bird patterns caused by my fishing activities. I'm not making this up. This woman actually convinced a federal agency that me catching bass was somehow screwing with duck GPS systems. The EPA inspector arrived next, suited up like he was entering Chernobyl, armed with water testing kits and a clipboard thicker than Vivian's legal bills. County Health Department Thursday morning. Code enforcement Friday afternoon. By week's end, I had more regulatory business cards than a Washington lobbyist. Each inspector found exactly what you'd expect from the cleanest lake in 3 counties. Absolutely nothing wrong. But bureaucratic harassment is a two-way street, and I was about to learn how to drive it. While Vivian was playing puppet master with government agencies, I was making friends with the puppets. Turns out, when you're polite to overworked civil servants forced to investigate obviously bogus complaints, they remember you. They also remember who's wasting their time. Dolores Martinez became my secret weapon. 68-year-old retired county clerk with a memory like a steel trap and a grudge against corrupt developers. Over coffee that tasted like justice and caffeine, she dropped a bombshell that made my head spin. "Marcus, that whole subdivision was built on protected wetlands. Developer got his permits by promising to preserve all natural water features. Forever. It's federal law." Knowledge nugget. Development permits often contain perpetual preservation clauses that legally bind all future property owners. Violating these environmental restrictions can trigger massive federal penalties. I spent the next weekend playing environmental detective, and what I discovered was better than winning the lottery.
Vivian's landscaping contractor, the same diesel-belching crew that had been serenading my fishing trips, was using my lake as their personal garbage dump. Grass clippings, hedge trimmings, fertilizer-soaked debris, all of it flowing directly into federally protected wetlands. Every Saturday morning at dawn, I became an environmental paparazzi, hiding in the tree line with my camera while the sweet smell of honeysuckle mixed with diesel exhaust. Third Saturday in a row, I caught them dumping organic waste straight into my water, the splash echoing across the still morning air. The photos were gorgeous. Time-stamped, GPS-located, high-resolution evidence of federal crimes happening in broad daylight. But the real jackpot came when I ran their license through the state database. Pristine Landscaping LLC was 40% owned by Richard Blackwater, Vivian's husband, real estate developer, and apparently part-time environmental criminal.
The EPA doesn't just love environmental violations with photo evidence. They absolutely worship them when they're connected to harassment campaigns. I filed my complaint Monday morning with a smile that could have powered half the county. By Wednesday, pristine landscaping was under federal investigation. Richard lost 3 county contracts by Friday. Turns out, when you're dumping organic waste in protected wetlands, municipalities suddenly don't want you maintaining their public parks. Who could have seen that coming? The sound of Vivian's perfectly controlled world starting to crack was sweeter than church bells on Sunday morning. But if I thought environmental violations would humble her, I was about to learn just how spectacularly wrong one person can be.
The morning I came home from visiting family in Charlotte, the sharp, metallic stench of copper sulfate mixed with mass death hit me before I even stepped out of my truck. The lake water turned an unnatural blue-green color, like antifreeze mixed with apocalypse, and there was Big Bertha, floating 20 feet from the dock, her massive body already bloated in the contaminated water after 3 years of morning feedings, watching her grow from a decent-sized bass into a lake legend. Now, just another casualty in Vivian's suburban genocide, alongside 200 other fish, bluegill, crappie, catfish, an entire ecosystem assassinated overnight because one woman couldn't stand watching someone enjoy their own damn property. My hands shaking as I fumbled for my phone to call the county environmental emergency hotline, connecting me to Officer Jim Patterson, who'd been investigating illegal dumping for 15 years. His voice shifting from routine bureaucrat to DEFCON 1 when I described the aquatic crime scene, instructing me not to touch anything, keep pets away, not disturb the evidence, and that he was bringing the hazmat team.
Patterson arrived with water analysis equipment that looked like it belonged on Mars, the test strips turning colors that don't exist in nature, deep blues and purples screaming massive chemical contamination. And he confirmed, voice tight with professional fury, industrial-strength copper sulfate poisoning, explaining that whoever did this didn't just kill my fish, but sterilized the entire ecosystem for 2 to 3 years minimum, constituting felony destruction of property and possibly federal environmental terrorism. A knowledge nugget noting that illegal dumping of industrial chemicals on private property is a felony in most states, carrying 5 to 10-year prison sentences for federal environmental crime charges. But Patterson wasn't done playing detective, reviewing security footage from Mrs. Henderson's doorbell camera across the street while I stood holding a garbage bag full of what used to be my fishing paradise. The crystal-clear video showing a Clearwater Solutions truck arriving at 2:17 a.m., 2 figures in protective suits dumping death directly into my lake and vanishing by 2:43 a.m., 26 minutes to destroy 70 years of family heritage. And that evening, I sat on my dock holding one of the smaller dead bass, remembering my grandfather teaching me to cast in this exact spot, the wooden planks feeling cold and splintered under my legs. The silence absolutely deafening, with no birds, no insects, no life around water that used to bubble with activity, until Sandra found me there an hour later, both of us crying as we started the nightmare cleanup of environmental terrorism.
Grief sharpened my focus like nothing else. And as we filled garbage bag after garbage bag with Vivian's victims, my electrician brain started connecting dots, recalling that I'd installed solar panels on dozens of houses in this subdivision, intimately familiar with their utility systems, knowing every house in Willow Creek Estates uses well water pumped from the same underground spring system that feeds my lake, the same aquifer, the same water source, now laced with the same copper sulfate contamination flowing through limestone channels toward 847 unsuspecting homes. So I had my water tested the next morning by an independent lab, the results making my blood run cold with copper sulfate levels 4 times higher than EPA safe drinking water standards, revealing that Vivian hadn't just poisoned my lake, but contaminated her entire neighborhood's water supply. Every faucet, every shower, every ice cube maker in that pristine subdivision now serving up industrial toxins. And the woman who spent months bitching about my unsightly fishing activities
had turned her perfect community into a toxic waste site, about to drink her own poison in a sweet, metallic taste of karma.
You know that moment when you're researching one thing and accidentally discover nuclear codes hidden in your grandmother's recipe box? That's basically what happened when I decided to dig deeper into my grandfather's property records. Drive into the county courthouse basement on Monday morning, a government purgatory smelling of old paper, dust mites, and crushed dreams, where I found the original deed transfer from 1952, buried under decades of irrelevant paperwork, my fingers black with archival dust, when I uncovered a paragraph that stopped my heart, including all water rights, surface and subsurface, to underground spring system and tributaries thereto in perpetuity, Latin for forever and ever, suck it, revealing my grandfather hadn't just bought land, but every drop of water flowing through the underground spring system from miles beneath what became Vivian's precious subdivision. And as I sat in that dusty basement, hands trembling, holding a 70-year-old document that made me the most powerful person in 3 counties, things got absolutely delicious when I pulled the 2008 Willow Creek Estates development records, showing the developer's water usage permit application claimed independent wells with sustainable water sources that tapped directly into my grandfather's spring system 400 feet downstream from my lake, every single one of them, without purchasing water rights, likely unaware they existed as a separate asset. A wrong, expensive, career-ending mistake, because, as a knowledge nugget notes, water rights are completely separate from land ownership and must be explicitly transferred, with failure exposing developers and homeowners to massive legal liability and usage fees, meaning for 15 years, 847 families have been using my water without permission, compensation, or knowledge that their most hated neighbor owned every drop from their taps. The math, average household water usage times 847 homes times 15 years times market rate for water rights, spinning my head with tens of millions of dollars in back payments I could legally demand.
When you discover you're sitting on a legal nuclear weapon, you don't swing it around like a drunk guy at a bar fight. You assemble a team of highly trained assassins who know exactly where to aim. Starting with my first call to Rebecca Torres, an environmental lawyer from Raleigh who'd built her career destroying corporations that thought poisoning communities was just good business. Her eyes gleaming as she reviewed my documents and declared, water rights violation, environmental contamination, public health emergency. Marcus, this isn't a lawsuit, it's a masterclass in legal warfare that'll be taught in law schools for decades. Her strategy, a beautiful multi-front assault, a federal lawsuit for water rights theft, EPA emergency intervention for contamination, state criminal charges for illegal dumping, and civil suits for property damage, emotional distress, and punitive damages that would make a lottery winner blush. Followed by my second recruit, Dr. James Mitchell, a hydrogeologist from NC State, who makes opposing lawyers weep during depositions, kneeling in contaminated water that still reeked of chemicals, and noting, fascinating aquifer structure, single-source spring feeding directly into residential wells. Contamination will reach every home within 6 to 8 weeks. We're looking at 800 to 1,000 affected properties. His science a hammer to crush any doubt about Vivian's guilt. And finally, Sarah Morgan, an investigative journalist who'd spent 3 years taking down corrupt HOAs like she was collecting scalps, spreading documents across my kitchen table and declaring, "This is Pulitzer-level material. Power-drunk HOA tyrant poisons entire neighborhood while terrorizing the guy who legally owns their water supply. CNN will fight MSNBC for first interview rights."
Rebecca crunched numbers with calculator precision, calculating the market rate for water rights in our county at $50 per household monthly times 847 homes times 180 months, totaling $30.6 million in back payments I could legally demand before even factoring in punitive damages for the contamination. But I made a decision that separated justice from revenge, refusing to financially destroy 800 innocent families just to punish one psychotic woman. So Rebecca proposed a settlement. waive all back payments in exchange for complete lake restoration, Vivian's resignation, plus criminal prosecution and permanent oversight to prevent future abuse, while Dr. Mitchell designed an 18-month restoration plan using natural bioremediation, native fish restocking, and aquatic plant restoration, costing $250,000 to be paid jointly by HOA funds and Vivian personally, as Sarah coordinated media timing for simultaneous story release with legal filing to maximize public pressure, crafting an elegant plan to hit Vivian with federal charges, state charges, civil liability, and national media exposure all at once, giving innocent homeowners a path forward without bankrupting them, forcing accountability without collective punishment, backed by evidence that could convict, unchallenged expert testimony, and media ready to turn Vivian into a national symbol of HOA tyranny, with the moral high ground to play beautifully in court and public opinion, now just needing the perfect stage for Vivian's very public downfall.
The Pine Ridge Community Center, packed with 300 people in a space meant for 200, buzzed with body heat, nervous energy, and burnt institutional coffee as TV news crews set up cameras, deputies guarded exits, and EPA representatives sat grim-faced in the front row, while Vivian, in a flawless designer suit, sat on stage with the HOA board, her eyes betraying a cornered animal panic, despite constantly checking her phone for a miracle. As my team, Rebecca Torres, Dr. Mitchell, Tom Martinez, Sarah Morgan, and I, armed with game-changing documents, sat third row, letting Vivian dig deeper before our move, with Patricia Morgan, the new board president, opening the meeting to address water quality concerns, the crowd erupting with parents shouting about sick children and property values dropping $40,000 in 2 weeks, demanding answers until Dr. Sandra Murphy from the EPA presented damning water testing results on the projector. Red numbers showing copper sulfate levels 4 times above safe standards, pointing to my lake on the aquifer map as the contamination source, stating it spread through the spring feeding their wells. And when someone shouted, "Who dumped the chemicals?" she looked at Vivian, calling it a matter for criminal investigation, chilling the room as 300 heads turned to her. Then, as Patricia introduced me to discuss property rights, I took the microphone, camera swiveling, and revealed my grandfather's 1952 deed, reading, "All water rights, surface and subsurface, to underground spring system and tributaries thereto, in perpetuity." Explaining, I owned the aquifer feeding the subdivision, with every drop from their taps, for 15 years, legally mine, due to the developer's failure to purchase those rights, sparking confused shouting until I clarified I was waiving $30 million in back payments, but holding Vivian accountable for poisoning my lake and their water. As Rebecca stood, detailing Vivian's federal environmental destruction, state illegal dumping, embezzlement, and civil property damage charges, backed by video evidence and bribery attempts, prompting a deputy to approach with an arrest warrant for environmental crimes and obstruction, the room exploding as Vivian, ghost white, screamed it was a setup, her mask of rage and classism exposed for 300 witnesses and 3 cameras, and I proposed a settlement for full environmental restoration, funded by insurance and Vivian's restitution, no back payments, and independent oversight, shifting the crowd's anger to cautious hope, with the board unanimously supporting it. 6 months later, I stood on my dock at sunrise, watching native bass fingerlings released into the crystal-clear lake, the chemical stench gone, Dr. Mitchell's 18-month restoration plan surpassing expectations, with EPA tests showing 0 contamination, Big Bertha's descendants thriving, and the Grandfather's Lake Environmental Trust, funded by the settlement, creating an environmental education program for local schools, turning tragedy into something beautiful, while Vivian faced 3 years in federal prison, 5 years probation, $75,000 in restitution, 200 hours cleaning waterways, and a permanently revoked real estate law license.
losing everything for trying to destroy one man who just wanted to fish in peace.
The twist nobody saw coming was that I opened my lake for community fishing, with families from the subdivision gathering every Saturday morning under proper environmental management. Kids who'd never held fishing rods learning to cast from the same dock where my grandfather taught me, and the annual spring festival becoming a neighborhood tradition, celebrating the restored ecosystem, community cooperation, and the idea that sometimes the best revenge is being better than your enemy, drawing 500 people this year, with proceeds funding local water conservation. While our legal case set a precedent, cited in 3 other North Carolina water rights cases as a model for balancing individual property rights with community needs, and inspired HOA reform legislation that passed the state Senate last month, requiring financial transparency, limiting HOA authority over pre-existing properties, and establishing penalties for harassment and power abuse, ensuring one woman's tyranny led to systemic change, protecting thousands of future homeowners.
Here's what I learned. Never let petty tyrants make you abandon your principles. Document everything. Know your rights. Sometimes the best way to defeat your enemies isn't destruction. It's building something better from their mistakes. Your turn. Have you dealt with HOA nightmares or property rights violations? Share your story in the comments. Your experience might help someone else facing similar battles. If this story of standing up to petty tyrants and protecting our environment inspired you, smash that like button and subscribe for more. Next week, the city councilman who tried stealing a veteran's land through eminent domain abuse, until the veteran discovered the councilman's own property violations. That karma was even sweeter. Remember, whether you're in North Carolina, Texas, California, or anywhere else dealing with power-hungry HOAs, you're not alone. Communities are stronger than tyrants. Truth is more powerful than corruption. And sometimes one person standing up for what's right changes everything. Thanks for watching. Now get out there and protect what's yours.